This is Norman Kissinger from Redeeming the Time Brothers Ministries. Norman Kissinger and Gene Kissinger, two brothers who have been in the ministry for many years and want to just move online to share the gospel and discipleship and training and fellowship with other believers, especially pastors and Christian workers who are attempting to minister in these, which are potentially the last days. And so I want to continue with my subject of my book that I've been reading by George Muller. And the author outlined some reasons that he believed, after studying his life extensively, that he was so successful in his ministry. Two that I'm going to kind of add together because he had them in a list, but they're very close to each other as I go over a few more. One he called his cutting loose from man, and the other one was called his freedom from human control. Now, this is the same principle that we've talked about before, but mentioned in a slightly different way. George Muller was a man who had made the decision that one of his ministry goals was to show the world that God was faithful and able to exclusively take care of anyone if they asked him in prayer and met the conditions of prayer and had fellowship with him. And so for him, he did not tell anybody his financial needs ever, except for close personal friends who and ministry partners who agreed with what was going on in the ministry. George Muller simply refused to do that because he wanted to show that God was able to do that. And so God honored him for that decision because that was part of his life ministry. And I believe that we all have a life ministry, that we all have a life message and a life ministry that is unique to us, and it makes us be able to reach certain people that other people couldn't reach because they didn't have our life ministry. That's why I think that God calls certain people at certain times in their life. Some of them get saved very young, some get saved when they're older, some get saved out of very much deep, if there is such a thing, because we're all deep sinners, but out of worldly sins. Some get saved out of very moral type of lives, but they know that they're sinful in their hearts. Regardless, God uses everyone at different ages and stages of their life because other people may need that life message. And so this was very much George Muller's life message. Another thing he said was that George Muller always took advantage of opportunities that came along, and he would listen to the Holy Spirit and know when it was time to talk to somebody on the street or pass out a tract, that he was very open to the Holy Spirit to take advantage of opportunities that came there. So in order to do that, we have to be close to the Lord in order to make that happen. Now, the next two are two that really George Muller didn't have a whole lot of control over. One of them was his release from civil obligations and his companions in service. Now, he didn't have complete control over those two, other than a willingness to follow the Lord and be obedient to him. But the first one dealt with the fact that George Muller, I believe where he came from in Prussia, would have been required to serve several years in his army. God made it possible for him to not do that and to devote his life to Christian service. And that's what they're talking about here for his ministry ability. And the second one was his companions in service. And that is, God sent people into his life who are of like-minded, that he was in oneness of spirit with, so therefore he can minister without a lot of drama and other things going on because they all agreed with that. Now, that is sometimes something that maybe a minister has no control over. There's a lot of ministers that could do a great work for the Lord, and a lot of Christian workers. I think we put a whole lot of pressure on leaders saying that they need to act a certain way and do certain things, but sometimes maybe it is us as followers that also need to make sure that we're where we need to be doing what we're supposed to be doing. And so if you're involved in any ministry, you need to be at one with that ministry. And if you can't be at one with that ministry, you need to go find where else God would have you to minister and what else he would be having you to do. The next one was his view of the Lord's coming. And this is a technical one I won't go over a lot because he believed that not every person, it wasn't the goal of the church to reach every person in the world, but to reach all of the called out ones for God's church and his bride. And it's kind of a technical thing, and I confess that I'm not up enough on his argument to express it or to give that a big yes or no. But included in this, though, is something that I certainly would agree with him on, and that is that every Christian should be looking forward to the return of Christ. Part of what fuels us as Christians is our looking forward to Christ's return and his coming back. And so that's a good thing, especially in these days when I believe very much, with all the turmoil in the world in general and some of the prophetic things that may be happening, that we could potentially be in the end times, that looking forward to the return of Christ is something that should motivate and fuel every Christian to be as close to the Lord as we can, and ministering to him and throwing off all the weights that encumber us, as Hebrews says, so that we can be faithful to the ministry that God has called us to. God bless you. You have a great weekend. I'll probably jump back on here and do a couple of more of these. You just have a great time and just enjoy your summer days.